and welcome to Next Gen Finance, an SEB podcast about sustainable finance. My name is Lina Apsheva, I'm your host, and today I am joined in the studio by Hans Beyer, Chief Sustainability Officer at SEB. Welcome to the podcast, Hans.
Thank you, Lina. Good to see you
again. Great to see you, and it feels like it's been a really long time coming to get you to talk to me here. But what I really wanted to talk to you about, Hans, is just the latest developments in the world of sustainable finance, really, because, it feels like there has been a lot, and the geopolitical environment is affecting sustainable finance, and developments in regulation are affecting it. A lot of different things that are coming in, and it felt almost wrong to keep, zooming in on specific topics without addressing the bigger picture. So I thought that in this episode, maybe we could go back to the bigger picture and look at sustainable finance a little bit from the outside. What do you think?
I think that's a great idea. And yes, things are definitely moving quite fast around us.
And speaking of moving fast, I think when I first started working with sustainable finance about 5 years ago, there was this metaphor that people always talked about, and it was that the train of sustainability is leaving the station, kind of. And now I feel like this train has not only left the station, but it's moving so incredibly fast that you almost have lost even the idea of what it looks like. So hopefully today we can go back to basics a little bit and define these borders of this train of sustainability.
Would probably be helpful for many people to define that train again. But yes, the whole narrative around sustainability has been both challenged and changed, and during a very short period of time. I mean, we go back 1 year. We had the same conversation that we had in 22 and 21. Of course, the Ukrainian-Russia war has changed a lot, and that was kind of the starting point when things started to become complicated around us. And then ever since, it's just accelerated the complexity on how to view sustainability and what is, if not right and wrong, but what are the right considerations concerning sustainability.
Definitely. And speaking of the view of sustainability, if we start at a very basic level, how do you define sustainability and sustainable finance?
Well, when it comes to sustainability, it's been a lot of discussions around what it is, right? And I think that for me personally, and this is a discussion that we have had also in GESC and with those that are positioned in GESC, which is the Group Executive Sustainability Committee of the bank, is that we feel comfortable with an actually quite old definition of sustainability that was developed during the Brundtland regime in the UN, where they said that sustainability is to cater for today's generation's needs without jeopardizing tomorrow's generation's ability to fulfill their needs. And I think that that's a proper and good and solid way to define sustainability. And of course, in the old days, there was no conflict. But today we just realized that there is a bit of a conflict in that statement. And when it comes to sustainable finance, it is to support that. Because finance is a very integral part of our society at large, and then sustainable finance is there to support that. The speed of how this change or adaptation will happen is really what we're talking about, and what considerations we have to take basically into the general discussions of how to run society today has also changed quite dramatically.
Absolutely. And on that topic, what do you see as the role of banks in society in general?
Oh, well, that hasn't changed much since the Medicis. We take deposit and lend to those that hopefully can use the money better. Now, bringing sustainability into the equation, it's again a question of reallocating, or to first allocate capital and then reallocate capital, including a lens of sustainability onto the question at large, right? So, and there's been a lot of discussions about profitability versus sustainability. And I think that we can conclude that sustainability cannot replace profitability short-term and even medium-term, but is very likely a prerequisite for long-term profitability, much because sustainability is actually just embracing change, right? And then this change has certain characteristics when we're talking about sustainability.
And how would you say that the role of sustainable finance, or the concept, you can say, of sustainable finance changed in the past 10 years? Or if we compare what it looks like today versus 10 years ago?
It's again a hard question to define shortly, but I say that it was very digital from the beginning. When we brought the first bonds to the market together with the World Bank, it was green or not green. Today is much, much more granular. We're looking for what impact the money has that you deploy. How can we measure that the impact is really there, and that the impact that we're looking for is the right one? So I think we've become much, much more knowledgeable about this. But as you rightfully also stated, it's been a very short period of time. And if I may broaden that a little bit, right? Before COP21, Heidelberg Material decided that probably fossil-free cement is a good thing to deliver. And now, 11 years later, we're still 1 year away from them to deliver fossil-free cement. So changing complex or crude real life activities when it comes to industries takes time. And those that try to do it faster apparently don't always succeed.
Definitely. But if we take a step back a little bit from that discussion and look at the regulations, we at SEB have just recently published our latest sustainability statement, which is a part of our annual report. And this was the first sustainability statement that was prepared in accordance with the CSRD,
Yep.
the Corporate Sustainability Reporting Directive of the EU. And we didn't have to prepare it according to CSRD, but we chose to do it anyway. So how did that go? What is your experience overall with this reporting?
It was very effort heavy activity. It's been a lot of heavy lifting done by people, both in my organization, but also from finance and risk and everywhere else. It had all the hallmarks of a process that you hadn't done in the past, and it became quite big, and it's good that the information is out there, and some of the information is very, very useful for our investors. But there's a lot of information there that I think, unfortunately, there are not a lot of people would use.
As we say, transparency is a red thread probably of sustainability and incredibly important. So yeah, interesting to see how the regulatory environment is going to develop and how the different levels of transparency are going to play into the view of sustainability.
Yeah,
you can say.
I think it's important to state that transparency is good. It is also a very natural part of our society at large now, that we have internet and everyone knows everything almost instantly, right? But it also has a flip side if it's too much transparency, if you provide people with too much information, right? Because then you cannot digest it, and you can't take out the important parts of it, right? And I think that is a little bit what's going on right now with the omnibus changes that we see concerning European regulation, that now that we have asked for so much information, we just realize that maybe not all of it is of A, high enough quality today, and B, it's actually useful to ensure and to realize what we're actually looking for here, to make sure that the reallocation of capital actually supports future sustainable activities.
Definitely. And I think that's one of the, if we go back to the question of how sustainable finance looked 10 years ago versus now, that's probably one of the clearest differences that you can see, the amount of regulation that comes into it. And I think in the beginning of, for example, the green bond market, it was such a voluntary based kind of reporting market. And now there's all these other regulations around how companies should report on these issues. I'm glad you mentioned the omnibus bill in the EU to kind of ease the sustainability reporting regulation. And in general, we have seen this whiplash sort of effect against ESG in the world, probably more in some parts of the world rather than in the others. What is your view on this development, and why are we seeing it, do you think?
Well, I think that we do see it because it went to become so intrusive, both on business and on people's assessment of what was right and wrong, that you you naturally get a bit of a backlash, or a whiplash, as you call it. It's hard to make a judgment of right and wrong here. I think that the underlying current of moving towards more circularity, more efficiency, more use per whatever way you calculate it to produce something is undeterred. I think that will continue, and that will have positive effects. But I also think that we need to realize that the global south, as we call it, the poorer part of the world, will want to grow, and that will consume more energy. And the question is whether we're going to succeed in produce energy more efficiently than we've done in the past when countries develop. That will have a huge impact. I think that the need to communicate, we will do this and we will do that, will probably go down a little bit, especially from the private industries. But I think that they will continue because it's natural for companies to develop, and it's natural to become more efficient. It saves money, you become more profitable, and at the same time, you use your resources more efficiently, and that has a positive impact over time. I think that if you want to call it the tabloid part of sustainability, will probably decrease and continue to decrease, but people will continue to focus on delivering.
Very interesting. One thing that makes me think about is another debate that maybe we don't have to go into right now, but kind of the marketing of the sustainability transition, right? Because like you said, there is a lot of aspects around efficiency, making our systems more efficient, making the clean energy more affordable, and increasing the overall quality of life. I mean, I don't think that anyone on either side of the political debate would argue against that. But the problem here is how we are serving this concept of sustainability to the general public that can be argued whether against or in favor of. And yeah, like I said, we don't have to go more into that, but that's just something that I've also been thinking about when it comes to the developments around sustainability.
Yeah, and that's also an area where the regulators do become, if not nervous, at least picky, which is that you can't oversell your contribution. And I think that that's correct. We should be cautious about what we actually, within quotation mark, what do we actually sell? What can we prove that we contribute with? So a more sober relationship, both from a communications perspective as well as a regulative perspective, would probably be quite well received by society at large.
And if we look a little bit more specifically at the Net Zero Banking Alliance, where SEB is a founding signatory and still a member, no plans of leaving, at least at this time, there has been a lot of developments around that alliance and that organization recently, with a number of large American banks leaving. So what do you think about these developments and the future of the Net Zero Banking Alliance in general?
It's not an uncomplicated issue, but the Net Zero Banking Alliance was formed at the Glasgow COP, and it was a good initiative under GFANS. For banks, there was one initiative, there was another one for asset managers, and there was another one for the insurance industry. The laws are very, very different between the US and in Europe, right? So some of these things that you signed up to were not compatible with US laws. And those are part of the reason why some of the American institutions left. But at the end of the day, when we looked at Net Zero Banking Alliance, we saw a very, very positive effect from it, that we would have comparable ways of looking at banks, right? So if an investor then should choose between a bank, now, what kind of credentials are you looking for from a sustainability perspective? And Net Zero Banking Alliance was able to provide some kind of harmonized way of look at banks, right? Now, in our part of the world, that is now law, or at least regulation, in the form of ESRS, right? European Sustainability Reporting Standards. So if you want to, we got out of our membership in the Net Zero Banking Alliance, that we wanted. If you want to, mission is fulfilled. Does that mean that you have to leave the alliance? No. Has it fulfilled its purpose? To a certain extent, yes. Where we're going from here, we will see. Everyone knows that they are now changing the statutes, and realizing that some of their requirements on their members were probably a little bit too intrusive, because it was a little bit like they became a regulator as well, right? Then they can't be that. So let's see what the vote, because all the members will vote now about the new suggested rules and requirements. And if that comes through, we will see another Net Zero Banking Alliance form somewhere after summer.
All right, thank you so much, Hans. And now it feels like we've gone a little bit more into the niche questions. But if we zoom out once again to the bigger picture and the role of banks in society, I think there's also been yet another discussion point and debate point, maybe, of what responsibility do banks have when it comes to driving this change, the sustainability transition. What is your view on that?
That is quite a complex question. So as long as we have what we call a fiat money regime, which means that banks are the major, or rather large universal banks are the major credit provisioners in society, we have a responsibility to support society at the same time as we have a responsibility to our shareholders. Because if we don't fulfill that kind of social contract, we will have a problem. It doesn't mean that we'll be closed down or anything, right? We will have a communicative problem. So being a large financial operator in society, in the geographical society where we are a big bank, that comes with a certain amount of responsibilities. And those responsibilities we try to be very public with through our policies, where we state how we view different businesses and industry sectors. These we think are important parts, and those are the things that we take into consideration when we support that particular area. But banks do play a large role in society today. What's going to happen tomorrow, we don't know, because there's a lot of development with fintechs, such as Klarna, such as Think, and others, where banks, we don't yield to their in these part of the world or in this part of business, but there will be others than banks that support society at large. But if we're talking about credit provisioning, banks will continue to play a very, very important role, and we have to cater for both our shareholders and our stakeholders in that sense, as well as for society at large, and that includes our supervisory authorities.
And how would you say we find the balance between this role in ensuring stability and security, but also driving change at the same time when it comes to sustainability?
I don't think that I can answer that easily. I think that we should and we will continue to work as we've done in the past, being very, very cautious when it comes to credit provisioning and making sure that we stay true to the long-term view that we have, both working with our customers as well as making sure that the bank is future-proofed for future challenges. And we will, as we've always done for the last 164 years or whatever it is now, stay true to those very, very fundamental core values of the bank.
Mm-hmm. And Hans, before I let you go, I have two a little bit maybe more positive questions, hopefully. One is, as the Chief Sustainability Officer of SEB, is there anything that you're really looking forward to seeing in the world of sustainable finance in the coming years?
Yeah, so one of my major issues that I usually talk about is that we have succeeded in talking about sustainability a lot, and we have engaged a lot of people in sustainability, but we've had quite hard time in establishing profitability out of sustainable investments. And I think that as we move forward to establish is a little bit too a strong word, but getting closer to formulate a market solution for carbon removals, I think that we finally are closer to unlocking the fiduciary duties of those that manage money. Because at the end of the day, it's quite hard to prove that a sustainable investment has actually provided you with profitable results. And if you don't do that, you put sustainability in competition with returns, right? And we haven't unlocked that Gordian knot completely. But this might be one of the keys that's going to help us. So that's one very positive thing, I think. And even though there is a bit of a, if not I wouldn't call it a setback, but calming down of the discussions around sustainability. I think that it also lends itself to letting a lot of the latecomers or less convinced, if you want to, actors to come closer to where the rest of us are. And I think that we will together formulate a stronger drive forward in the future compared to just the foresighted running away and not getting the rest of society with them.
Mm-hmm. Sounds great. And last question before I let you go. A lot of our listeners are people that work in the banking sector, but maybe not directly with sustainability.
Mm-hmm.
So what would your advice be to them when it comes to thinking sustainably, thinking in terms of sustainability, but still kind of within other areas of banking, perhaps? Or within other areas of business in general?
Well, I think that curiosity helps a lot. Read, challenge, discuss. It is not an uncomplicated area, especially if we move beyond emissions into nature. But everyone realizes that, of course, nature is affected by the fact that we get emissions. And we will also, through heating up the planet, get more unstable weather because you lift more humidity out of the ground and out of the sea into the air, and it has to come down because water doesn't go away. So keeping the discussions alive and challenge and ask and become smarter and read. It's hard to say that apparently since it's 10 times as energy using to use the ChatGPT compared to the Google something. But at the end of the day, just make sure that you get your questions answered. That's or at least find an answer to your questions if you understand it, and if not, continue to ask, right? Because at the end of the day, this concerns most of the things that we encounter every day.
Mm. Ask and you shall receive. I think that's a great piece of advice. Hans, thank you so much for coming on the podcast and sharing some of your thoughts. It was definitely a little bit more of a philosophical discussion than we usually have, but I think that it was great, and hopefully we can continue having these discussions moving forward. It's really very much appreciated.
Now I'm looking forward to the next time. Thank you, Lina.
Thank you. And as always, a big thank you to all of our listeners for tuning in. Don't forget to subscribe or add the podcast to your favorites wherever you're listening to us on, to make sure that whenever new episodes come out, you will be notified. But for now, take care and goodbye.